Welcome to A Year in the Bible with Daily Grace. The Bible tells one big story of redemption, and we want to spend 5 minutes every day journeying through the Bible from start to finish and exploring how all of it points to Jesus.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of our podcast, The Bible in a Year with Daily Grace. My name is Miranda, and I'll be your host during our time together. Today we are looking at 1 Samuel 22 to 24. There are many sad stories in the Bible, but 1 Samuel 22 contains one of the most somber scenes I've ever read. David is continuing to flee from Saul. It's gotten so bad that he has to leave his mom and dad with the king of Moab for their own safety. Now we might think this is weird because the Moabites did not worship the Lord, but some of David's ancestors were actually from Moab. Remember Ruth? They had family ties there. But it's horrible that his family is more safe with people who do not love God than with people who claim to. Saul is growing more and more paranoid. He is beginning to think that even his servants are against him, and he is especially frustrated over finding out about the covenant between Jonathan, his own son, and David. Saul rebukes Jonathan about this as he lounges under a tamarisk tree, and one of his servants, Doeg the Edomite, takes advantage of the situation. Though the text does not tell us this specifically, Doeg definitely is trying to earn some power and prestige with Saul. He tells them about the interaction he witnessed between Ahimelech and David, and how the priest helped David by giving him food and a sword. Saul is furious, and he calls Ahimelech and all the priests to come before him. When he accuses Ahimelech of conspiring against him, Ahimelech responds by telling Saul what is true. The man Saul is trying to kill is the most faithful person to him in his whole kingdom. Ahimelech had inquired of God for him, but he had no idea about the strife between the two of them. While Ahimelech is righteous and humble in his response to the king, Saul has completely gone off the deep end. He orders his servants to kill Ahimelech and all the priests, which is not what he is supposed to do. Just like David did not touch Saul because he was the Lord's anointed, so Saul should not have touched the priests of God, who are also consecrated by the Lord. The servants refuse to do this, rightly so. They fear God more than they fear Saul. So Saul has Doeg do it, and he does, and he kills everyone and everything at Nob. It is a wicked, vile, horrendous massacre at the city of priests, all because Saul is paranoid for his throne that he knows has been taken from him. One of the sons of Ahimelech, Abiathar, escapes and finds refuge with David, and David claims responsibility for the slaughter, since he had seen Doeg when he was at Nob. In chapter 23, David continues to evade Saul, but he takes down some Philistines while he flees. He does everything by seeking God. I think it's important to observe how trial and difficulty causes David to depend on the Lord. He has seen the faithfulness of God, but now it's what he clings to. There's a sweet scene between Jonathan and David in the middle of this chapter. Jonathan encourages David in his faith and reminds him that what God has decreed will come to pass. David will be king. Jonathan is the example of the friend we all need and all should strive to be. He shows up in the middle of crisis and points David to who God is. Chapter 24 shows us another pursuit of David by Saul into the wilderness. When Saul was traveling by a cave, he stopped to go in and relieve himself. And it just so happened that David and some of his men were in the recesses of that cave. David's men want to kill Saul, but David cuts off a corner of Saul's robe instead. David still feels bad about this because Saul is God's anointed. And after Saul leaves the cave, David comes out and confronts him. He shows him the corner of the robe, and he humbly declares his faithfulness to the king. He will never harm Saul, no matter how badly Saul is convinced he will. David is tender here towards the king, and his speech leaves Saul in tears. Saul knows David could have killed him, and he didn't. And he also knows that David will be king. David reminds us so much of Christ in these passages. He desires to do the will of God and to obey the Lord above all else. And when he could finally be free of Saul and go back home and begin his reign as king, he chooses to spare his enemy's life. He humbles himself before Saul. This is the humility of Christ, who humbly gave up his power and position to save enemies of God so they could instead become brothers and sisters. We are not like David here, y'all. We are Saul, broken in sin and pride, and Jesus, like David, humbly offers us friendship and forgiveness. However, we can seek to remember the story of David in this trial and know that even in our worst moments, God will use our pain and fear to bring us close to him. In light of eternity, he uses it for his glory and our good. If you enjoyed today's podcast, we'd love it if you would leave us a short review. It helps other people find and enjoy this podcast as well. We also just love hearing from you and seeing how this tool is in helping you in your walk with Christ. There's no greater encouragement for our team at the Daily Grace Co. I'll see you tomorrow for more from the story of David.